Hey everyone, thanks for joining our LinkedIn and Zoom live event. My name is Courtney Bramlett, the Director of Sales here at VerSprite Cybersecurity. And today I'm joined with our Managing Consultant for the Legacy Offensive Security Group here at VerSprite, Joaquin. I will go ahead and let him briefly introduce himself before we get started answering the internet's most asked questions about penetration testing.
Sounds good. Thanks, Courtney. Hey, everyone. Kind of nervous here because of going live to the internet. Just wanted to let everyone know I am the team lead for our offensive security practice. I've been with VerSprite for 6.5 years now, and hoping to get some clarity on these questions that we found to be the most commonly asked around penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, on all kind of adversarial simulation kind of cyber attacks. So hoping you can learn from this talk, and please feel free to share any questions on the chat, and we'll take care of that at the end.
Yep, just like Waco said, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments and we'll be reviewing them as we go through this event today. But we're gonna just start off with the first question, super simple, but Joaquin, what is a penetration test?
All right, yeah, that's the, I would say, most simple question, but actually is the most tricky one, I would say. And basically it is because I think, I mean, from my experience, I've been doing this kind of pen testing for 15 years already. And I can definitely say that the term has been evolving through time, right? There's this concept of penetrating something, right? But nowadays everything is in the cloud, on the internet, so you're not actually like penetrating so much the infrastructure of someone if that's like borrowed in some way. So what I did in preparation for this talk, I went to Wikipedia, which is the most consulted knowledge base on the internet. I mean, given that we are answering the most commonly asked questions on the internet, to grab some definitions and start working from there. So for penetration test, what I found is that this is also called a pen test or an ethical hacking. And it says that it is an authorized, simulated cyber attack on a computer system performed to evaluate the security of the system, and that this is not to be confused with the vulnerability assessment. So obviously I then had to go and look for the definition of a vuln assessment, right? So now we are introducing another term when it comes to define a penetration testing, because they are pretty related, right? So Wikipedia is saying that a vulnerability assessment is the process of identifying, quantifying, and prioritizing the vulnerabilities in a system. I could say both are accurate, but as I was saying at the beginning, I think that the term penetration testing has been evolving, and what it used to be might not work to what you generally talk about when it comes to penetration testing. And this is something that I just thought when I was working with this definition of the concepts. I mean, where does the penetration part comes from? And I mean, taking into account that how the networks and the infrastructures of businesses used to be, right? Where you used to have your own internal local network, then some kind of DMZ zone and a bastion host connecting all of that to the internet. Obviously, you had this concept of someone roaming around freely on the internet, penetrating into your network, right? But as things evolve. We are now moving everything to the cloud. The borders are more blurred right now, right? So you don't have this concept of an internal network anymore. You are giving this all to the cloud. So the concept of penetrating something, it is kind of different. So I would say nowadays, the term penetration testing, it is a kind of an umbrella expression that comprehends a lot of different types of exercises. So hopefully we can give light on how we think these exercises should be called or be executed, right? And that depends on the target that you're gonna test. It will depend on how much information you're willing to share with the tester. It is also depends on whether you're hoping to find as many wounds as possible on a single target, or if you're actually to understand how deep someone could get, maybe. So all of that is gonna be taken into account to define what kind of exercise you're gonna get.
Yeah, that's good. That leads in perfectly to question number 2. So I know you briefly talked about vulnerability assessments, the difference between pen testing, et cetera. But first, let's start with what are some of the different types of pen testing? So web application pen testing, network, API, things like that. Let's briefly go into each one of those.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So the concept is more or less the same, I would say. What you are referring is about what the consultant or the ethical hacker is actually gonna be targeting, right? The methodology will mainly depend on what you are trying to compromise, right? So there's OWASP that came up with this methodology for testing web applications, which is pretty awesome. So you would use that if you get to target a web application. Then for network testing, there's another type of methodology, and so on. So the concept, it is the same, right, when it comes to penetration testing, but it can differ on the methodology depending on what you're going to have for the target.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, so before we go into question number 3, I did a poll this week on LinkedIn, and the question was, is automated penetration testing a real thing? So I know from question 1, this is something you're super passionate about. A lot of people like to stick, penetration testing under one huge umbrella. So the results were 50% said yes, that automated penetration testing is an actual thing and it should be a separate service. 30% said no, and 20% said not sure. So question number 3 is, what's the difference between penetration testing and vulnerability scanning? So go into a little bit more on depth on that, especially the manual and automated aspect of pen testing and how that might almost relate to a vulnerability scan. Because we get a lot of clients that come in that think they're asking for an automated test, but really they're looking for manual and vice versa. So a lot of people get these confused just on our end of the business. So go ahead and dive into that a little bit for us.
Right, and I think, maybe where there's confusion, it is around this concept of, because of having a manual penetration test, that someone could assume there's actually no automated parts of the penetration testing, when that's actually not true. And let me bring up, let me share my screen here. I have, what is it here? There you go. Can you see my screen? Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me bring up here what's considered to be a standard in penetration testing methodology. This not only applies to applications, but also can apply to networks and all kind of penetration testing that you could embark on, honestly. Web services, mobile testing, whatever. So I would say, for the full penetration testing, you have to go by all these many phases that you have here. You have, first, let me quickly describe what we have here on the screen. The pre-engagement interactions, that happens obviously before actually starting with the testing. That's related to the work that you do with the customer on trying to understand what their expectations are, what are they looking for in terms of objectives or outcome from the penetration testing exercise. Also starting to devise what you're going to be testing, if it's going to be a web app or web service or a combination of any kind of those assets that a company has. Once that's set and you build the SOW, the statement of work, once that was agreed, there's this kickoff meeting that we have to make sure we are all aligned on what was discussed earlier. And then we start with the testing. But the testing, I mean, the way we do things, right? It doesn't start right away with testing what we were given as a scope. It starts with a reconnaissance phase and intelligence gathering phase, where we work with everything that's public on the internet, trying to learn as much as possible on the target, right? We then do this concept of passive and active scans for information gathering. And then we go into a threat modeling phase, basically trying to analyze and review every information that we've got from this previous phase, trying to determine, okay, what's gonna be most critical for this target, right? What are the areas of more risks for this customer? So from there, we start building the attack patterns and move towards the vuln analysis part. And here I'm gonna make a stop because I would say for this phase, all of the work is mostly automated, right? We base a lot of our work on tools. We mostly use Nessus, Qualys, Acunetics, Burp Suite with their Burp Scan, trying to find also as many vulnerabilities as possible. This is common to both exercises, to vulnerability assessment and to penetration testing. The idea is that the more vulnerabilities that you can find, the better that you're gonna do on the later stages, right? But here's one thing. I mean, with vuln assessment, the main goal is to try to find as many vulns as possible, right? Then you are gonna be somehow quantifying them and giving them a priority or a scoring, so customer can understand better where they need to put more focus on remediation. And that's it. I mean, for the vuln assessment, you don't go through the entire circle here. As when it comes for a penetration testing, again, there's this concept of penetrating, right? Breaking in and going inside and see what you can do from there. So from the vuln analysis, once you find the issues, then you start this work of understanding what you have, analyzing how they can be maybe combined in a way that you could perform an abuse case of something, or maybe you can compromise an insecure service, right? So you get to exploit the vulnerabilities that were found, not only validate it, right, but also exploit them. And from there, with what you get, and that can be either more information for something that wasn't public, so unauthorized access to certain sensitive information, or you got access to an internal network or to other part of the cloud infrastructure that you were not supposed to have access to. And from there, right, you start again this process of, okay, from here, let's try to see what are the issues that I can find. So so I can see later how I can abuse them, right? So, and you do that within certain time. There's unfortunately this concept of a time constraint for penetration testing, which is, I would say, the only thing that separates a penetration testing and offensive penetration testing from what a real attacker could do, right? So you get to execute these many stages in a circle round, and then you get to do that on a certain amount of time. Then you go to reporting, right? When it's time to start wrapping up the testing, where you document everything that you've done. Here at VerSprite, we not only present the vulnerabilities, but we also make a lot of work, put a lot of efforts on letting you know the many testings, the many different testing that we've done, and that maybe you were doing okay. So it's important to you it is important to you to understand what are your weak points and also what are your strong points, what are your strengths, right? That means that you are doing right on that area and that you should keep with that approach onwards. So when it comes to reporting, we also have this concept of letting you know after our work, our review, our analysis, where is or what are the areas where the risks are, right? This concept of residual risk analysis that we share on the analysis and conclusions section of the report. So going back to the question, differences between vuln assessment, penetration testing, when it comes to do automated stuff and not and whatnot. This is the standard methodology for a penetration testing, and for a pen test to be called like so, you have to go through all these many phases. If somehow you stop in the middle, like with a vuln assessment, because you find the vulnerabilities during the vuln analysis circle, then you validate it and you skipped the exploitation and post-exploitation, you went directly into reporting. If you didn't go through the entire circle, that's not to be called like a true penetration testing, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a side question for you. So have you, since you started pen testing, even just for VerSprite 6 years ago, have you seen any like increase in trend in clients or organizations spending a little bit more time, like increasing their time scope almost, because they're starting to understand they need a longer engagement to truly understand what the hacker is going to do? I know on my side, from the sales side, just in the last couple of months, we've had a few people come in, you know, they're wanting full, you know, what we call organizational threat models, the red teaming, the application pen test, network pen test, and they're, you know, purchasing us for 6 to 8 months, 3 months to try and get a little bit more, you know, stealth mode. I know you like to call it that. So we're not, you know, triggering those internal controls as quickly, things like that. Have you seen an increase in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since I started here, I think we used to do like 1 or 2 red teaming engagements during a year. Now I think we have like, I don't know, almost around 10, because those are quite extensive in time, right? Because of the approach. So yeah, I mean, definitely like, I know, 5x, I could say, something like that.
Would you say, like, would you recommend to people, simply because the time constraint problem that you're mentioning, that like red teaming is going to be their, you know, probably best investment to truly understand what a real hacker could do? Would you say that would be, you know, one of their top investments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to understanding what a real hacker could do, right? That's the type of work that you're looking for. You're looking for something that's offensive, something that's stealth, something that's not so constrained by time, right? That's why typically a red teaming that we do, generally it lasts at the very least between 4 to 6 weeks. So you're trying to take this concept of time playing against the exercise out of the equation, right? Because that's something that a hacker doesn't have to deal with. They have all the time in the world. And it is pretty interesting because that just doesn't apply to red teaming. When it comes to, for instance, doing application pen testing, generally what we recommend to most of our customers is to give us or to share with us all or at least certain parts of the source code, right? Because that's a huge time-saving approach, going more into gray box, white box approach of testing when it comes to dealing with this concept of time. And maybe I'm going a little bit ahead here because I introduced this white box, black box, gray box kind of thing. But yeah, definitely. When it comes to simulating a real attack, you want to get offensive. You want to give proper time for it. So that's what I would say a red teaming is about.
Perfect, thank you. So next question, I think this ties in good, is how would you recommend someone choose what security assessment should they, start with? So I think this probably ties into a lot of times you'll hear Tony, our CEO, talk about build, manage, and optimize. So would you say certain security assessments work better for different organizations in each of those buckets? So maybe they're just building their security program out, or there's someone that, huge company, they've got good stuff in place. What security assessment would you recommend to them based on those 3 levels?
Right, yeah. So definitely, I would start with an interview with customer, trying to understand how mature they are with this concept of cybersecurity, right? If they have never, ever performed a pen test before, I would start with something more offensive that sets the bar, right? That can be used as a baseline from there on, right? So I would try to stay broad, and I would try not to restrict the exercise in any way. And at the same time, I would try to, as a customer, right? Now being on the customer side, I would try to help the team. Like, hey, if you need something, let me know. Sometimes it happens that companies are using now Cloudflare, or they have their own protection mechanisms for firewalls and web application firewalls and whatnot. And again, here we have the concept of time again. If we have to test certain scope within 2 weeks, and we have to deal with this protection mechanism that you have in place or in front of your infrastructure, that's gonna be a pain to deal with, because we might end up like consuming most of the time trying to go slow because of this protection mechanism that you have. So if we agree that you are actually wanting to know how you are doing for sure, right? And not testing how your firewall works, then you could allow us to maybe be assigned our IP addresses that we are using to come from for our testing on a whitelist. So going us through, right? So we don't have this kind of barrier in the middle of our tests and the actual scope. That's something that's pretty common. So for someone that have never done a penetration testing before, yeah, I would try to keep broad, use a first pen test as a baseline, and move from there. When it comes to companies that are already involved with cybersecurity, that they have their own internal program for cybersecurity and whatnot, we have a kind of an holistic approach to cybersecurity because we have many different groups that can work on many different areas and attend many different needs. So again, it comes to sit all together on a table, talk about what you are doing right now. Maybe you need a little bit more help with your policies, or maybe you need a little bit more help securing your application. So maybe bringing us in to help you with the secure development lifecycle. And when it comes to penetration testing, I would say, I could review how you've been doing that. Most of our, well, not most, that's lying, but some of our customers are only doing penetration testing because of compliance. And that's good, right? But you should go beyond that if you really care about your security stance, which nowadays I would say everyone should be doing a proper hygiene of how everything is looking to the public. So I mean, if you're maybe already involved on penetration testing, but just because of compliance, maybe going beyond that and having, a true red teaming to find stuff on those areas that you are not even looking, right? So that's more or less how I would approach things here.
Okay, that makes sense. So this leads in good for question 5. So when an organization is vetting a vendor or working with someone for penetration testing, how should they prepare and scope for that pen test? And then I want to see if you can read my mind on this, because I know this is something that you push on the sales team a lot for. What should be a red flag to them? So they're working with a vendor, they're trying to get, a proposal for a penetration test. What is something that vendor does that should be a red flag for them before they engage with them?
Cool. Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, I mean, if you are looking for a pen test and you get an answer from 2 vendors and one is giving you a price already without even asking what they are going to be targeting, I should discard that one, at least for now, and start working with the other one to see what they have to offer. I would rather go with the one that gets involved with what they are going to be testing because they want to understand what's in a scope, what are the objectives of testing. And here there's another concept, but we live and we breathe this risk-based approach for testing, right? That's our motto. We have Tony, who wrote this book for PASTA, the process for attack simulation and threat analysis, which is basically a model, a framework to work with risk-based threat modeling. And it has 7 stages. And I mean, the main concept here is to understand what you are working with, right? And that's what we do. Yeah, I would rather go with the one that's actually a little bit more cumbersome to start with, but knowing that they may asking the questions because there's an idea behind that, right? That there's some rationale of getting familiar, not only with the customer, but also with what you're going to be testing.
Yep, absolutely. Tony pushes on us as well. He always says, walk the landscape first before we move in, keep that discovery part of our sales cycle longer if need be to truly understand what the team's going to be testing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the last 2 questions kind of tie together a little bit. So one, what would a real hacker do? And then how are we different? So I know that Tony and a lot of people throughout the organization, yourself included, the main two things that I hear is that we have a creative team and then we use adversarial tactics. So those are some of the top two things that I hear Tony talk about when he's talking to clients, organization, he's doing talks. Those are the top two things. So anything that you want to add there about, first we'll talk about what would a real hacker do, and then we'll move into how we're different.
Okay. What would a real hacker do? Okay. Yeah, I already talked about this, but a real hacker doesn't have to deal with time constraints. A real hacker could, I mean, if they are really targeting something, they are not gonna sleep, they are not gonna rest, and they are not gonna stop, right? And I can tell you, I mean, from my experience, that's what we do. But when we are engaged on a red teaming exercise, and because that's what you would want when it comes to be getting something that's similar to what a hacker would do. There are no limits, no restrictions in what you could do to achieve this goal that's set at the very beginning of the exercise, right? You work with the customer, you set a goal or some kind of flags, and you go for it. And you are not restricted in whether you can just hit a web application or just focus on certain network segment. No, you are gonna go all for it. I mean, and you could even target people, right? We use a lot of social engineering during the red teaming. Trust me, it gets real. So targeting people, targeting networks, targeting web apps, targeting even mobile apps, disassembling them, trying to understand what's on the back end of the app, trying to see if there's anything loose there, and even targeting buildings. I mean, that's what a real hacker would do, right? They don't sleep, they don't rest, they don't stop. And that's what we do when it comes to getting as real as possible. So yeah, the offensive approach for the red teaming.
Okay, and then how are we different? I know that sounds super cliche, but I have some notes here on certification. So I know a few people throughout the organization have their own opinions on people who have a stack of certification, and they're a pen tester. So go into a little detail there about your team. You know, maybe they do have a ton of certifications or some other things that you think makes our team, something that makes them a little bit more outstanding. I mean, just so the audience knows, Waco's team is one of the main reasons we can claim our 97% client retention rate. Their work is phenomenal. So anything you can provide us on the background of your team experience, that would be great.
Yeah. So when it comes to certifications, yeah, I have also my own internal mixed feelings, right? There are a bunch of those that are that have more reputation, I would say, as OSCP and yeah, more or less all the certificates coming from offensive security program. But then you have some that are not that good and whatnot. So we still have those certifications. That's good. But I would say, I mean, when it comes to describing the team, experience, a mix of different skill sets, passion, right? As I was saying, we don't sleep, we don't stop when it comes to red teaming, and it's because you've been assigned a target and a goal, and I mean, honestly, I've been there. Now I'm managing the team, but I've been there. You just want to get that, right? It is a challenge. We are curious people, and you go towards it. So passion is one of the first things I have to say. And then expertise. We Some of the people on the team come from another company that developed an exploitation framework. So we have people with very low technical skills when it comes to reverse engineering, exploitation. Then we have people that's really awesome doing application testing. We have awesome guys working with Windows networks, right? So when you get in, they squeeze in on every single corner to get domain admin access. So we have, yeah, this kind of complex mix of skill set with a lot of expertise that goes a little beyond on what you can show on a paper. Obviously, we still have the certifications because sometimes they are useful. But that's what I would say set us apart. This push for being offensive, this push for keeping the time that's needed so we don't lose this imagination while working, right? This developed criminal mindset along the years and so on.
And then the second thing I have down is our threat modeling process. So like you mentioned, Tony, with the risk-based threat modeling methodology, he co-founded Pasta. I know that sits at the core of everything we do, including, you know, penetration testing, but as well with the GRC team, et cetera. And really the number one thing is contextualizing the risk to your organization. So explain to me kind of the history of when you were first introduced to that and how was that different, like that threat modeling piece from Tony's methodology, how is that different from anything you've ever used before? And, you know, any benefits that it brought to you that helped you, you know, with the pen testing overall?
Cool. Yeah, so when I joined VerSprite and learned about Pasta, I was a little bit skeptical, I could say, because I was thinking, okay, but this is, I mean, this is still some kind of theoretical analysis. And I came from like being on the benches, right? I was being sent to on-site internal testing and whatnot. And then I understood that, I mean, there was a lot in Pasta that I was already doing, but it was more kind of implicitly on the exercise, right? Because before hitting something with an attack or wherever, you do this exercise of thinking, okay, so, I mean, what do I have here? Let's start to break things down a little bit to see maybe if there's a weak point somewhere that I haven't seen from the top, right? So I was already doing this implicitly, and then I learned that this was a framework, right? I was trying to use that in a way that I wasn't used to. And then, well, obviously talking with Tony, we understood how the many stages actually can be, if you remember this circle of the methodology that I was showing before, how each of the many stages that Pasta has actually relates to one of those stages. So you have first this definition of business context, and that's where you have this first circle of pre-engagement interactions, right? You get to talk to the customer, you get to understand their business and whatnot. Then you start working with enumerating technology, decomposing application. That's what we have with the reconnaissance phase and the intelligence gathering, right? And then there's this concept of threat analysis that was already there. That's good. But then Pasta gets real. And that's what I hadn't seen when I first knew Pasta. It gets real. It gets all of these assumptions that you made put to test. So you have a stage for actually testing all those attack patterns that you build. And then at the very end, as we had on the PTES methodology, the penetration testing execution standard methodology, you have this reporting concept where what we do right now with Pasta is taking a look at everything that we've done and analyzing where's the risk being left, right? And we communicate that to customer. So I would say, yeah, pasta is a huge differentiator on what we do.
I don't think you could have answered that any better. I think I learned a few things as well. That was awesome. I'm sure Tony will be happy to listen in on this as well. But that comes to the end of our questions. So if you have anything else you want to add, go right ahead. And then we'll close it out.
Yeah, no, I would just like to convey this idea of the need for these real attack simulations nowadays, that everything is on the internet, that everyone's working from home, that everything is on the cloud, right? So assigning more resources, and that goes directly to allowing for more time to get as real as possible. That's something that everyone would benefit from. So yeah, definitely there's going to be a trend there, as we've been talking, coming from maybe doing 2 or 3 red team in a year. Now we are doing around 10, which is insane. But yeah, definitely taking care of your security and understanding this is a real thing going on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I wanted to do a special shout out to marketing as well for allowing, instead of getting all this set up and allowing our team members the opportunity to speak on what they do so well. I know you guys put a lot of effort in that. Also to all of our viewers for joining us. This means a lot to us as well, that you guys took your time to step in and listen and ask questions. So we really appreciate the effort from your side as well. It's been a pleasure. If you guys want to stay updated on everything VerSprite, we have a LinkedIn page and a Twitter page as well. Marketing pushes new content every week. So go ahead and head over there and give us a follow. Again, thanks for joining us, and everyone have a great day.